Okay, we're beginning our Bible study, The Paradox of Happiness, by Renee Bruel. Uh, we find true joy in a world of counterfeits, right? Deception. Again, this isn't original with me. It comes from the book, The Paradox of Happiness. Part 3, The Rhythm of the Liberated Life. Chapter 7, Getting by Giving, Part 2. So this is the second part of chapter 7. We start with the introduction, and then we looked at the cross Jesus took up, the cruciform life, and now we're looking at a self-giving God. The history of God's giving, the foundation for such a life posture run deeper still, for Jesus' cross was not an isolated incident. It was the acting out in history of God's own self-giving nature. It's not an arbitrary expression of the nature of God according to Rowan Williams, but what the life of the Trinity is translated into the world. The cross is the consequence of the encounter between rebellious humanity and the loving community of Father, Son, and Spirit, or the Holy Trinity. That opens itself to embrace and redeem the world in Jesus' outstretched arms, or through Jesus' death on the cross. When God sets out to embrace the enemy, the result is the cross. On the cross, we can look at a dancing circle, or the relational identity of self-giving and mutually indwelling divine persons opens up for the enemy. In the agony of the passion, the movement stops for a brief moment, and a fissure appears so that sinful humanity can join in. And so the picture here is the relational identity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit and how they interact. And one theologian says it's like a dancing circle, but the movement. And when Christ died on the cross and rose again, at that moment, in that special time, the Trinity in its relational identity invited us in so that we can dwell in God and God dwells in us. And so we have a relational identity with God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Such a fissure or an opening, such grand entrance is God's invitation to the festive fellowship, Father, Son, and Spirit. In the cross, God extends humanity his hand, so to speak, to invite us to his eternal shared life. In the words of Dallas Willard, the aim of God in history is the creation of an all-inclusive community of loving persons with God himself at the very heart of this community as its prime sustainer and most glorious inhabitant. And so we become part with the Trinity. We join, and God sustains us, and he inhabits, he lives amongst us, and we have that special relationship with God when we become believers. Even before creating the world, God was inherently relational. Okay, so we had the relation between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit even before man was created. As a triune community of Father, Son, and Spirit, there is an intrinsic relatedness in the divine nature. Right? So there is a a relational relationship in which Father, Son, and Holy Spirit interacted. Such a shared life is a divine dance twirling from eternity to eternity, or a communal interaction, a community of divine persons who move in each other and offer space for the movement of the others, of a self-surrender, self-giving, a mutual interweaving and indwelling of divine persons in one another. Each person receives everything from the others and at the same time gives everything to others, points out another theologian. And so basically, what we're trying to do is show the interaction of the Trinity, which is very difficult for us to understand when we look at one being, God, right, in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and how they interact. But we've been invited to interact with them through the death and burial and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He says, I dwell in you, you dwell in me. We have that relational participation. So, as a community of persons, God is fundamentally relational. Self giving is the basic posture of God's nature. This affects the way we understand reality and what it means to be human. Since God created us, He created us to be relational. If the creator of the universe is a community of persons, then being means communion. A person is not a self-enclosed substance, but is constituted by his relationship both to God and others. God created us to be part with one another. To be a person implies a movement towards communion, which leads to a transcendence of the boundaries of self. It means a movement of mutual love among us in the outgoing and responding of persons to one another. This is the reason why being curved in or self-centered on oneself is such a disorder of personhood. It's not the way we were created. Okay? Being a person is something inherently relational. We're moving out, not in. To be self-centered is to shy away from the fundamental dynamic of existence and to evade the community of love of God is gathering in Himself. Right? So if we're going to be part of that community of God's love, then we need to love one another. We need to be part of the whole community. We can't just be related to God. We need to be related to one another and care for one another and forgive one another and have that special relationship that we see here. And that's where happiness is going to come from. Self-centeredness enfolds us in ourselves. Okay? We look for happiness for things that we want. It's always self-centered, what I want, what I need, and once we start looking out, then the whole truth of where happiness comes from changes. But selflessness grants the opening posture needed for relationships, love, and communion. We have to be willing to be selfless, not self-centered, in order to have true godly relationships. Because God is a triune community of persons. A human being functions in the image of God. When she nurtures a self-giving posture that generates loving relationships. So when we have loving relationships, that's part of being in the image of God. The cross is the great reversal of history, God's abrupt interruption to install the reign of love. The moment that liberates the world, the pinnacle of the drama of redemption. The resolution for the accumulated sins and conflicts and cruelty of millennia is the moment when God gave Himself for His creatures. God reversed the tide of self-centeredness with an epicenter of self-giving. He showed us the way that we are to live, breathing grace everywhere. The self-giving God, the self-giving love This act of love shook everything and sent waves that shaped all that exists. Self-giving is imprinted upon the very functioning of the universe. This is the way we are meant to be. Okay? We are to be self-giving. Jesus' observation, very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. A kernel of wheat will only find its purpose if it gives of itself, if it's willing to die to self, right? The kernel has to die, put in the ground, and then it grows and it's able to produce. It will grow into wheat if it is willing no longer to be a kernel. The cycle of nature is based on death giving way to life, and on self-giving as the logic that generates further life. A fundamental quality of existence is that it is given, not getting. Okay? It is offered for free, and it is multiplied when we extend it further. Okay? What we give is free, and the more we give it, the further it goes. Grace is the environment in which life flourishes. Nature gives of itself. We receive from all around, and by receiving, we learn the basic posture of giving back. That's because our Creator is a self-giving God. He gave us life in creation, and He gave us His new life when He gave of Himself on the cross. As Bernard of Clairvaux expresses poetically, in the first act, He gave me myself. So that's when Adam and Eve were created. He gave them themselves. In the second, He gave Himself. And when He did that, He gave me back myself. So we see Adam and Eve here. We see the fall. Then God gave Himself, and in giving Himself, He was able to give fallen man back Himself. Given and given back. I owe myself in return for myself twice over. The dynamic of self-giving is not merely Jesus' centuries old advice. It is our participation in the way God functions and in the logic He imprinted on reality. As a theologian put it, all finite beings exist because of God's giving away, and it bears the mark of its origin, because in the scheme of finite reality, all things give themselves to be known and loved. If you don't give of yourself, you can never be known or loved. In other words, God's self-giving nature is imprinted on everything He created. We are always, we could say, moving towards being seen, being understood, and delighted in, moving out of itself at every level and in every mode. In Hans Urs von Balthasar analysis, God's giving away on the cross is the pattern behind all reality. You and I are to give. No greater gift can man give than give his soul for his friend. It is the mode in which our souls function, the prototype of everything. If this observation is correct, God's logic of self-giving lies behind not only the functioning of the universe, but it is also written upon our hearts. It is the only thing that can truly make us happy. For behind all our efforts of self-centeredness, all our paraphernalia of self-service, lies this: It's written on our hearts. We were not created to be self-centered. We were not created to be selfish. For the glimpse of a movement, we present ourselves to others. We offer ourselves as a possible gift, and we wait to be appreciated, known, and loved. But in doing that in a sinful world, we're also putting ourselves out there to be hurt. Was Christ not hurt on the cross? Was he not despised and rejected? And he tells us that we need to be willing to suffer. But if we want happiness, we have to be willing to give of ourselves. Otherwise, we will never fully understand what we were created for. This is what we long for with all our ambitions and pursuits, the very thing we try to achieve through self-centeredness only comes through self-giving. We accrue reputation, attractiveness, hard work in the hope of being a gift worthy of being received. We are so preoccupied with the self because the self is the gift we have to offer to the world. The only shot we have of entering the dance of self-giving, appreciation, and love is giving that self, that which we have, rather than trying to keep it and add things to our own life. We constantly offer of ourselves to one another every day, every time we meet someone or imagine meeting someone. Okay? This is what makes us risk raising our eyes to someone crossing our path, offering a glance, waiting to be looked at in return. But we're putting our heart out there. We're willing to be rejected, right? This is what motivates us to work hard in the expectation that a select group of people will look at our legacy and say, well done. This select group of people should be God's children. We present ourselves to one another. The whole of our lives aims to be a grand, wholehearted gift, made in the image of God. We follow him in our deepest desires. We give ourselves and long to receive others in return. Relational identity of mutual self-giving, all right, is the logic that grants our lives meaning before God and others. But it grants our lives meaning. That's very important. It's this self-giving. And we talk about a mutual self-giving to give meaning. But if we're not willing to give ourselves, regardless of whether it's completely mutual, we'll never understand a relational identity. Because when we give of ourselves, then we're having a mutual giving with God, and we're drawing closer to God, and we, as we give, are becoming more Christ-like. So whether it's rejected or received doesn't matter, because we're pleasing God in what we are doing, right? And in pleasing God, there will always be happiness. Now, as we all function properly, then there will be a mutual self-giving. We'll each be giving to one another. The measure of our giving is the measure of our significance. We are defined not by how much we get, but by how much we share. We feel in our deepest instincts that the ultimate purpose of living is not self-contained. We do not live for self. Even the most egocentric of persons craves to leave something behind in moments of departure. And when the final deathbed departure comes, we long to have offered our beings to others, to have been worthy gifts, to have accomplished a legacy in what we've done for others, how we've helped, how we've encouraged, how we've taught, how we've walked alongside of. And we long most of all for the unimaginable embrace, that everlasting satisfaction which will be God's smile upon receiving us to himself. The rhythm then of love. This rhythm of being can be expressed in one word central to Jesus, the scriptures, and Jesus' followers, and that's love. For the word love refers to the action by which we transcend self-centeredness to encounter someone and give of ourselves. It is the dynamic where we meet and are met, where we know and are known. Love is the aim of self-giving, the atmosphere resulting from the mutual offering of persons to one another. Without self-denial, there is no genuine move outward. We can't be doing it for ourselves. It has to be self-denial. Without self-giving, there's no true encounter. When we love, we offer our beings to one another, forgetting ourselves amidst the affection. Self-denial and self-giving. With his call to a self-denial and self-giving, Jesus is inviting us to the logic he would express later as loving God and loving neighbor. For love is the impulse that generates self-denial and self-giving. The best picture we can think of humanly is when the mother cares for her baby child. She denies herself. She denies sleep. She'll often deny food. She denies time. She just denies herself, and she gives it to that child. That is a picture of God's love. And it's also a picture of the way that we need to be treating one another. That's why people who fall in love feel they live for the other and receive life from the other. It's why they promise to be together in sickness and in health, commit to take care of someone as they do of themselves. Love is the voluntary, delightful movement of self-denial in order to give ourselves. Sometimes it's very hard to deny self, the self-denial, right? And to truly give of ourselves. Here lies a fundamental truth. In love, we get when we give. When we get because we have given, right? Love is giving. It's not self-centered. It's worrying about the other individual. It's meeting the other individual's needs. And as we do that, we get back. We get joy and happiness. It's what we were created for. When we encounter, when we give of ourselves. Giving is a precondition for getting. Without this, there will never be that. Not a true getting, not a true happiness. If we do not open ourselves to others, there won't be an encounter or the possibility of love. We won't receive anything unless we step into the relationship of giving and receiving. And the thing we have to understand is we don't give to receive, right? We give because we love. The mother, when she's taking care of that small baby, she's not getting anything back, right? She's meeting all the baby's needs, and her love for the baby is growing, and she gets joy from that. The dynamic of love. But when we dare step outward, look beyond ourselves and cherish the presence of others, we find what we have been searching for all along, the dynamic of love. You can never be loved if you're not known, if you don't step out, if you don't give of yourself. We give and receive in a mutual offering of surrender. We delight in one another. We savor the encounter of souls that make space to receive the other. Love arrives as the greatest reward, as the deepest pleasure of our search for happiness. As Bernard of Clairvaux puts it, love is its own merit, its own reward. This is really important, okay? Love is its own merit. You don't love to get something. By loving you, it's its own merit. It's its own reward. It brings true happiness when we truly love, regardless of the response back. Because in loving others, we are loving God. Love has no cause or fruit beyond itself. Its fruit is its use. I love because I love. I love that I may love. Love is, so to speak, the last skin of the onion. It is the fulfillment of what it means to be a person, the inner dynamic we search for in general terms as happiness. True love will bring happiness because we give of ourselves. It says, we live so we can love. Love as I have loved you, says Christ. We find meaning for existence in the grand offering of ourselves to others. The appreciation we find in love is what we long for behind our pursuits, even though we may not realize it. And that's why we're studying this, so that we'll realize the importance of giving. Behind even the most self-centered of actions is really the desire to be able to love and to be loved. And love, by its very nature, is predicated on denial and giving of the self. There is no true love if you don't deny and give of yourself. Is that not what Christ did for us on the cross? Love is the final puzzle piece to understand Jesus' paradox. The saving life by losing life paradigm, which sounds illogical and incomprehensible at first, shows here its core mechanism. What's at the very core of this is love. Love, the ultimate dynamic we search for in vain through self-centeredness, is experienced successfully when we enter its own logic and give of ourselves. The desperate usage for getting is satisfied when our functioning is based instead on giving. Giving is what makes us happy, not getting. We renounce everything to receive everything. We share of ourselves to find ourselves. We forget about happiness to receive it unexpectedly. Now, this is really important that we understand this truth. We renounce everything to receive everything. If everything we do is to receive everything, we've got it backwards. We need to renounce it first. Really not be self-centered. We share of ourselves to find ourselves. We're not looking to find ourselves, we're looking to share. But when we do, this happens. When we renounce, we receive. When we forget about it, we find happiness. We find the plenitude we try to grasp by saving life when we lose it. We get by giving. The happiness we long for will be found. Coming now, full circle. When we deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow Jesus. That is the only way that we can become happy. When we're doing that, we show everybody we are his disciples by our love. And so as we go through this week, let's contemplate the responsibilities that we have in reaching out to others, touching their lives, giving of ourselves, and not worried about what we might or might not receive back.